Okay guys, in today's video, I'm going to be talking you through the process I take my prospects through to convert them from my 10 to 15K one-to-one peak health consulting package, and how I close on average 3 out of 4 sales calls that I take. So first, some proof. As you guys can see on screen here are some screenshots of some clients' payments I received in the last 12 months or so. I thought I'd include a whole multitude of different dates of payments being processed here. So this is one of my clients, Chris. In terms of traffic source, I'll also give you guys some context here. So Chris came directly from my YouTube, which I've been now uploading content on for the last 5 years. In terms of LTV from Chris thus far, I'm now at about, near £20,000, as you guys can see here. Spend being listed here is 9,375. And then on the first payment was 10K also. If we now move forward to Kane, Kane is actually a long-term client of mine. I first started working with Kane back in 2017. He was a client of mine whilst I was a personal trainer in Gymbox in Old Street. Got on with him really well, went for a few dinners with him, etc. Built a good relationship with him. And he decided to come back on board in December of last year. As you guys can see, that's another 10K sale there. If we move forward here, this is a client who I acquired from a mastermind I spoke at. It was Tyler Newman's mastermind. As you can see from this client specifically, that's 17,000, nearly £500 generated there. As we can see here, another client also in some capacity from Tyler Newman's mastermind, but also due to relationships I built subsequently from speaking at masterminds in Dubai. That's £16,500 there. This is an individual called KJ, who I worked with last year. He came directly as a referral and also in part from the work I was doing for Charlie Morgan. So for Charlie and Easy Grow, I was hosting peak health calls on a weekly basis every Tuesday. And KJ came as a byproduct of me hosting those calls on a weekly basis, which is very cool. So yeah, obviously you have content as a source of revenue, referrals, word of mouth, and also me hosting either presentations at events or also on a weekly basis in mastermind groups, products like Charlie's, etc. Right? Samuel here came from a referral from Bastian Slot, who's also a long-term client of mine who I first started working with in 2019. And as you guys can see here, that's £23,200 spent there. So now you guys have seen the proof here in terms of conversions of clients, etc. Let's now dive into the sales process. So in terms of acquisition channels specifically, I personally choose to prioritize YouTube, but of course I also acquire customers via Instagram, word of mouth, referrals, speaking at events, and also hosting education calls in the programs of other individuals in the online education space. Those are my primary forms of acquisition. I've toyed around with the use of paid, yes, but I acquire majority of my clients through organic mediums at this moment in time, and we'll continue to push the boat out because effectively, paid, all you're doing is you're paying for those eyeballs. You can do that in an organic manner if you know exactly what you are doing, and you build a brand, with reputable brand, you provide value in advance, and of course, communicate in a way which is effective for the recipient of the content, which I take pride in and work on continuously. So yeah, the prospect then applies via Calendly. And as you guys can see, I preference the fact that my service is going to be at least £10,000 to invest in. And therefore, of course, if the individual is not doing 6 to 9 figures with their business, it's going to be very difficult for them to afford this service, of course. And that's why I make it very clear as to the fact my service is high ticket without explicitly saying it's a high ticket service. I also give them the prospect context for what's going to be discussed on the call in terms of variables of health and how I will need to extract information from them to best help them navigate next steps, whether it be via working with me or taking their own measures, their own steps and their own accord. That's perfectly fine. But my conversion rate is about 3 and 4 sales calls, which is really positive. I also preface the fact that our sales calls can extend to 45 minutes. Typically, my sales call duration is 25 to 30 minutes. But as you guys can see from the recording I'll be uploading or have uploaded already of a sales call I took with my existing client, Chris, that was an hour-long call. That was the longest sales call I've ever taken in my career thus far, which is an abnormal stat because most individual sales calls do take between 45 to 60 minutes, but mine have typically been a lot more concise due to the sales process. So, of course, I opened the call by having a conversation with the prospect, building a little bit of rapport, asking them why they're here, where they came from, etc. Basic questions, nothing particularly intense by any means, just to get an understanding of why they're here in the first place, what outcome they want to achieve by potentially working with me to ensure that, of course, aligns. And then we dive into the process. So I then, of course, ask the prospect for permission to share my screen and explain that I'll take them through my process for delivery and give them context for how I operate, who I've worked with, etc. And they can interrupt and ask any questions at any point they please, any point they would like to do so, which is perfectly fine. So I then share my screen. I typically keep my Chrome window open also because I will need to utilize resources here. to showcase training protocols, nutrition, supplementation protocols, etc., simultaneously, whilst also showing my presentation slides, my sales deck. So obviously I introduced the fact that this is my peak health system service and I've been operating since 2018. And I've now worked with near enough 700 individuals who are 6 and 9 figure entrepreneurs. And I've very much enjoyed the process of doing so thus far. I then give context for the offer. And of course, the caliber of individual I work with, 6, 9 figure entrepreneurs. You guys can see that. And of course, you can refer to the recording with Chris to listen to the audio and the exact way I word this. Once that's introduced, and fundamentally the offer premise is communicated very clearly to ensure that the prospect has total understanding of what it is I deliver, or at least the framework for it, the overview of it as such. I then dive into nuanced detail pertaining towards the pillars of my product and the outcomes I can help that individual achieve to ensure there's no lack of congruency as it pertains to what outcomes they want to achieve by working with me, and ensure there's no misunderstanding between what I can help them achieve and what they want, right? Because if there is, they won't convert, and it's just a waste of time for both parties. So I refer to the 6 pillars of my product: optimal sleep, premium nutrition, peak cognition, flawless training, digital minimalism, personalized supplementation, and medical testing. I was inspired to create these pillars by Serge Faguet. I don't know if he still produces content at all, but I first came across this article he published in 2017, not long after it was published. It was probably October that year. And ever since, I've taken inspiration from his framework for his health protocols. You guys can see he broke it down into major blocks, 6 of them. I then, of course, took inspiration from this and expanded that into 6 pillars of a service. And I think that's really important because most prospects I converse with can't define what areas of health they want further help with or support with, and don't perceive them to be intertwined and all-encompassing, all impacting one another. And therefore, conveying that in a graphic format like this on screen is very advantageous to both parties. I can also then define very clearly what outcomes I can help the individual achieve, which are quantifiable. So my issue with most health offers when I first came into the space was the outcome I can help an individual achieve isn't quantifiable, unless, of course, it's physique-based in terms of body composition or weight, or strength gain, etc. Most other things, in terms of offers that I saw being serviced by the market, weren't quantifiable, and therefore they weren't clear KPIs. So I wanted to ensure that my offer was very much developed upon very clear outcomes I could help the individual achieve, which were guaranteed, provided, of course, their adherence was optimal. And again, my accountability is there to help facilitate that. So yeah, this is really important. And also knowing that the individuals that I work with are very analytical in their thought process, having this framework in place was extremely integral to my success and has been and continues to be so. Once that's done, and of course, there's a base understanding of what my offer is and how it can benefit the recipient, I then, of course, divulge and expand upon who I've worked with, individuals of status and authority, both in terms of social proof and infamy, and also in terms of what they've achieved with their career. So obviously I refer to Iman Gadzi, been working with him. I worked with him for a period of about 3 years in person in a one-to-one capacity whilst he's based in central London. Started working with him in 2018. And then I refer to, of course, what they've done with their career to give the prospect context, because some individuals won't know these people and they want to know context of who I've worked with, etc. And they want to understand the level of the caliber of the individuals I've worked with, because, of course, that's a direct reflection of my authority and also my status as a service provider. Also, I refer to individuals like Ryan Clark, who recently started to blow up on YouTube. Individuals who I refer to as being private geniuses who aren't public facing in terms of building of their social media platforms. And obviously you can see their revenue here is just insane. Financial numbers are insane. Clients I've worked with for a huge amount of time now, a very expansive period of time, like Bass, I've worked with on and off since 2019. Worked with all of his team members, his dad, his mastermind clients, etc. You can see a very personal relationship there, given that I went to visit him a couple of times in Portugal, spoke at his events, etc. It was very cool. Big players in the space like Cole Gordon, host calls for individuals like Charlie. And Charlie's not a direct client of mine, but I help him out with bits and bobs in terms of blood work, etc. And also I was hosting calls for EasyGrow, health optimization calls for EasyGrow. So I make that apparent in this part of the sales process also to ensure that if the individual doesn't want to work with me in a direct one-to-one capacity, they know they can do so for one-off consults. Or also, there's the opportunity for us to collaborate on things like me hosting calls for their communities, if they're education business operators, or speaking at their masterminds, etc. I want to make sure that there's every opportunity conveyed to the prospect so I can benefit from it. Individuals like Tyler, obviously big in the real estate space, you'll notice here, I'm hand selecting individuals who are infamous in the spaces they operate. So obviously Iman in the education space and the make money space as a whole. Ryan, the same thing applies here. This individual runs a software business. Bass was the biggest player in the appointment setting space. Cole is the face of sales. Tyler being the face of real estate in the UK. Female entrepreneurs who are also the face of Airbnb business formats in the UK and also in the Middle East. Yeah, you can see I leverage a huge degree of social proof. Marcos Rossetti being a massive player in the South American space. It's very important that I communicate that I work with clients internationally also to ensure that if the prospect on the call is based internationally, they can see that rapport being built, all the opportunities for me to work with them, no matter where they're based in terms of time zone as well, which is very important. Once that's done, and again, of course, I add a lot of context for that if I'm taking a prospect through a call, but I'm keeping this as concise as possible for today's video purpose. Once that's done, I then ask a really important question. Are you, as an individual, optimizing for lifespan or fulfillment via your health as a medium? And the reason why I need to define this is to ensure that I have a full understanding of how far I need to push this individual and how advanced a level of health they want to obtain. So, of course, option one being they see health as a tool for fulfilled living. They would like to use health to maximize experience, travels, social life, monetary gain, ensuring you're physically capable of living fully rather than meticulously extending life at all costs. And then on the opposite side of the spectrum, health as a lifespan first strategy, like a Brian Johnson. So most individuals that I work with will define themselves as resonating with sentence A. They don't believe health optimization to be the mechanism through which they facilitate most fulfillment. Their business, their social life, living life on their own terms is, and health is something which they need to, of course, take care of to ensure they have a fulfilled life. But obviously B being individuals like Brian Johnson who want to optimize for life expansion, life extension, over social life, over life experiences, etc. So I'll finish that statement. They see health as a lifespan first strategy. They prioritize longevity, where the goal becomes sustained life, often in a more constrained, health-focused way, potentially at the expense of living richly in the present. Clarity here informs us of the intensity and type of health habits you should adopt. So I need to define this with a prospect. And typically this is a question they haven't even asked themselves, nor has anyone else asked them previously. And therefore it does invoke a lot of questions and a deeper thought process associated to how they perceive health and its importance. Once that's done, of course, I again readdress the pillars of my product in terms of I then focus specifically on the outcomes I can help the individual achieve and facilitate. And I clarify if there's any questions pertaining towards the language I've used here. So, for example, if I'm informing the prospect of the fact that one of our key variables of success with sleep is increased REM sleep, I'll then ask the prospect, do you know what REM sleep is? And if they say no, I'll then pull up Aura and I'll then showcase the client's metrics, right? So here I'm just ensuring there's no lack of context for the process I'm taking the prospect through, or lack of understanding as it pertains to the language I've used here, like REM sleep, deep sleep, etc. Because if I'm just taking the prospect through a lecture and saying I can help you do this stuff and they don't know what it means, it's not going to benefit either party. It's total waste of time, right? So this gives me an opportunity to do so here. So when I first showcase the pillars of my product, I'm focusing on the pillars and not necessarily the outcomes. And in this opportunity here, I'm focusing more so on the outcomes now that we've clarified and understanding what the pillars are. I then take the prospect through a very brief assessment of their quality of health. And therefore, of course, this also ensures that not only myself gets an understanding I get an understanding for quality of health of the individual and their understanding and how they've chosen to prioritize or lack priority of their health previously. But it also reinforces the need for my service if a prospect answers anything from D below for most categories, right? So obviously everything from arguably C below is pretty crap as it pertains to sleep, training, nutrition, medical testing, supplementation, body comp, and behavioral change, right? So this then ensures that the prospect has no wiggle room here really, and they're communicating very openly, transparently. I haven't taken care of this stuff, I need to. So there's no negotiating on that. Once, let's say, for example, I inform them of the price, they can't then say, oh, I don't really need this, because again, they've admitted very openly to themselves and also me as the host of the call that they do need help with these things earlier on in the sales call process, right? It's a bit of a wake-up call for most people, truthfully, because they've not been through an assessment like this. And although this is brief and not particularly nuanced or doesn't allow us to expand upon these things in much depth, it does the job sufficiently for sure. So again, anything from C below typically infers they haven't prioritized these variables specifically and they need help doing so, right? Apart from nutrition, because that's a multitude of different approaches. Medical testing, oftentimes the prospects I'm conversing with have never done any medical testing, no blood work, no gut health testing. no VO2 max assessments, DEXA scan assessments, etc. Nothing. We're starting from baseline. So that enables me to inspire excitement as it pertains to the processes we can go through. And I'll show them on screen to the prospect. So if they say to me, oh no, I've never done any of this stuff before, I'll then pull up Asana where I host all my clients' information, and I'll then show them examples of what these results look like and how we can best leverage them. So for example, a DEXA scan, most prospects don't know what that is even, and therefore I can showcase the results and metric data we derive from this and how beneficial it is to us and how we can utilize that most effectively. Same thing applies to blood work, gut health testing, etc. If there's anything on this list that a prospect isn't aware of or isn't familiar with, I can showcase it visually whilst I'm sharing my screen, which means, again, absolute clarity is gained, and therefore there's no misinterpretation of my offer, which is really important. Supplementation, pretty standard and basic here. Again, if they answer anything other than A, I can then guide them through why it's so important to have everything optimized based on their blood work, and I can show them examples of this as well, which is great. Body composition, again, being, of course, a vanity metric, but also equally as important metric as it pertains to quality of health. And at this point, the prospect is self-admitting they haven't taken care of themselves if they haven't done so. And finally, behavioral change. And this question really is framed to ensure that I'm aware of whether or not the prospect is a person that commits to a process well and works well with a coach like myself, because I'll be conversing with them daily via WhatsApp, via Loom recordings, voice messages, and of course, a weekly call on a one-to-one basis. I need to ensure the person is an individual that adheres to the process as well, because if not, I resent working with them and they won't have success with the process. So if they inform me that they don't adhere to process as well, and they don't like accountability, they don't like being told what to do, they don't like being held to their word, then that doesn't bode well, right? And we need to confront that head on from the outset, even in the sales call. I then confirm very clearly my why, my reasoning for building this service. And of course, as I've expanded upon in previous videos, I lost my dad to cancer. He chose to take care of me, my brother, my mum, his career, and didn't really take care of himself so well. But obviously that has limited impact on whether or not he's going to get cancer in some capacity as well. It contributes, but it's not the be-all and end-all factor. And unfortunately lost him, but he was very successful as a dad, as a husband, and also with his career. He did the Champions League logo, which is really cool. Jaffa cakes, Andrex packaging. I met the Andrex puppies when I was a kid. All this kind of stuff. Very cool stuff. So that's a powerful why. And that leads to personal resonance from a prospect's perspective. And a secondary why, of course, is a narrative pertaining to and which resonates with a lot of the prospects and clients I work with who want to do whatever it takes to win. And I categorize myself in that as resonating with that statement also. I asked the prospect if they ever watched The Last Dance, the Michael Jordan documentary. Most of them have. It's very rare they haven't. And of course, Michael Jordan being a living embodiment of someone who did whatever it truly took to win, who leveraged every single tiny advantage at their disposal to maximize their raw talents and natural ability. And this is a narrative that, of course, associates itself with my offer very well, given that in this instance, most individuals that I work with are very smart and naturally gifted and talented and hardworking, but their quality of health has declined and subsequently has negative impact on their ability to perform. And therefore, they want to rectify that. It's obviously very difficult for them to perform at their 100% of their capacity if they're experiencing the following physiological factors. So constant sacrifice of sleep quality, plagued by brain fog daily, midday crashes, fatigue, turbulent emotions, procrastination, inability to think with crystal clear clarity, weight gain, work inefficiency, inconsistency in performance, etc. And I define that person as being a person that's body is working against them, who is operating at only 60% of their capacity. And a lot of my prospects really resonate with this. There's been times in everyone's career in which they've sacrificed their health to build their business, and actually has the opposite effect in most instances. And it becomes a negative and perpetual cycle very quickly. And I'm sure you guys can read through this. You can pause it if you want to do so. This is something that everyone can resonate with. When you get in a negative loop when it comes to health, it bites you in the arse and it's very hard to break. And most individuals that I work with are in their early 20s, late 20s and 30s. Some individuals I work with are in their middle age, so 50 plus, but most of them are younger. And therefore, if they are younger, in most instances, they've been bitten by the curse of early success. Or they've experienced a negative consequence of it where, as I said, they're the best early, they've done well financially, they've built a career for themselves, they've never learned to work efficiently and perform at the highest level, poor life habits, levels of focus, productivity and output, etc. And therefore, of course, subsequently, it's having an impact on them now. I want to take them from being a smart person operating at 60% of their capacity to operating at 100% of their capacity, because they're no longer competing against amateurs. They're competing against the Usain Bolts of the business world if they're doing anywhere from 6 to 9 figures. And fundamentally, this is how the 6 pillars of my product feed into and facilitate output. So yeah, visual demonstration of that is very important, and prospects resonate with it very well. And that, of course, reinforces the importance of all 6 pillars of my product. Once that's done, I then communicate clearly what my 12-week process looks like. And I make it very clear that my initial process is 12 weeks, but I work with clients long-term on a monthly basis after that. Some clients now since 2019. But fundamentally, our first objective is to achieve all outcomes and variables which indicate success within a 12-week process. So onboarding, of course, completion of onboarding forms via Typeform, which takes about 25 to 30 minutes for the recipient. That, of course, affirms the one-to-one desired outcomes and goals of the process for that individual. I then provide all products, so their Oura Ring, gut health testing kit, constant blood glucose monitor, electrolyte, supplementation, etc., etc. I provide that and cover the cost of everything, their DEXA scan, their blood work, gut health assessments, VO2 max assessments, everything I coordinate, I organize for and pay for the prospect to ensure, and the client, sorry, to ensure they have everything they could possibly need to maximize the outcome of the service. And then you can see I have a tick list here in Asana for every client I work with, testing and products, in which I confirm the purchase and booking of everything as well. I arrange for all tests to be completed. I organize this directly with the client or with their personal assistant, and therefore include their team members if necessary, like their PA. That results in the onboarding call taking place, and the preparation for that, as I showed in a video I recorded yesterday, looks like this. Here's the agenda for the onboarding call, and of course, key observations from their onboarding inputs in terms of their onboarding form, and then final action items furthering the call's completion. Okay. Once that's done, of course, we then move forward to testing. So testing takes place after onboarding, because of course I can't necessarily schedule their testing to take place on the same day. It's not possible. So blood test, gut health testing, DEXA scan, VO2 max, if needed, a lactate threshold test, sleep quality assessments, their initial ones at least from Oura or Whoop, depends on the client's preference, and their food intake, which I assess via a platform called Chronometer, which is like MyFitnessPal on steroids. It's way, way better, particularly in terms of highlighting micronutrient deficiencies. I then, of course, provide analysis and feedback on all variables, so their blood test results, gut health test results, DEXA scan, VO2 max, etc., etc., and of course, analyze and address any bottlenecks pertaining towards metrics indicative of concern, which are concerning. Okay, yeah, sorry for the interruption there. So yeah, analysis of current bottlenecks is pertaining to results, and also in terms of habitual variables as well, which need to be addressed from the outset of our work together. Introduction to their meal plan, following onboarding process, and of course, introduction to a personal chef who I liaise with on behalf of the client if required, or a meal prep company. It depends on preference. Personalized supplementation from their blood work, which is facilitated via Bionic, and then also the creation of their personalized supplementation protocol to achieve a multitude of different outcomes for the individual based on quality of health. So, for example, with Samuel specifically, there is a massive focus on improvements of digestive health and well-being to rectify years of error. And therefore, you can see that being highlighted here in the supplementation protocol as well. Instructions with their personalized workout protocol. I use True Coach to facilitate this, based on, of course, their cardiovascular and strength and physique goals as well. Personalized daily schedule to ensure adherence to all processes we're establishing. And, of course, furthering this, introduction to weekly one-to-one coaching calls and daily communication. So, as I've elaborated upon in previous videos, I speak to all my clients on a daily basis via WhatsApp, written message, voice message, Loom recordings, all three. Some clients message me as many as 20, 30 times per day. Other clients once or twice. It's perfectly fine. But of course, I need to communicate with them frequently to facilitate progression across all domains of health. And then I also, of course, facilitate this in terms of further support with a one-to-one coaching call on a weekly basis, which takes anywhere from 30 minutes to 45 minutes. Some calls require only 15 minutes, 10 minutes of time. It depends on how much information we've exchanged throughout the week. If there's nothing to address, there's no need to have a call for the sake of having a call. We just communicate very clearly to the client, myself, and the client agrees. Hey, we've discussed everything via Loom recordings, voice messages. We're up to date. We're good to go. There's no need for a call this week. And the client's paying for an outcome. They're not paying for unnecessary time allocated to calls. And all of my clients typically resent calls and want less frequent occurrence of calls. So they're perfectly happy with that. They'd rather communication via, as I said, WhatsApp, voice messages, and Loom recordings. We then move forward to optimization. So, of course, we've established foundations of all variables. We now optimize all 6 pillars. And that subsequently results in the outcome of peak performance. Now, depending on the quality of health of the individual and their adherence, they may want to continue my work with them beyond the first 12 weeks. And therefore, I proceed with that on a monthly basis. And I charge $5,000 per month for that service. And that sounds like a lot, but that also accounts for the cost of testing and further and subsequent product purchases. And also, of course, the allocation of my time, which is extensive. depending on, of course, what outcomes you need to achieve with the client. But yeah, that's my sales framework and process in a nutshell. I try to keep this video as succinct and short for you guys as possible, but I appreciate it's not always possible to do so. There's a lot to communicate here. But yeah, if you guys got any questions, don't hesitate to let me know in the comment section down below. If you are interested in working with me in a one-to-one capacity to help you start, grow, and scale your online fitness and health coaching or consulting business, check out the link in the description. It'll take you down to a peak business system in school, in which I work with individuals like yourself to help you start, grow, and scale. And I do so, of course, personally myself. But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this one. Give it a thumbs up. Drop any questions you have in the comment section down below. And I'll see you guys in the next one.